the Met, of course, you are not necessarily the center of attention, you know. And I remember my first year in 1977, 24 years old, and you know, you're in the prime of you've just won this audition and you're playing really well, and then you sit down there and you think, I'm really playing beautifully. Somebody is bound to come up to me over the lip of the stage and, you know, do that. Somebody's going to wait for me at the stage door. And they're going, oh, Mr. Parloff, I want to tell you. And of course, that didn't happen. You know, and the whole year goes by, and you realize gradually that no matter how beautifully you're playing, in my day, Placido Domingo is standing on your head, and he's wearing a crown, and he's wearing a cape, you know, and he's surrounded by 100 chorus members and supernumeraries, and a Zeffirelli set, which is going up and down, and there's barnyard animals, and so, I mean, you are simply not the center of attention. And,
unless you are accidentally.
Unless, and I'm wondering, how did you, you must have, you know, confronted that.
It's very interesting how it just like becomes a giant chamber music experience.
Yes.
And it's not about you, it's not, you know, and it's about the unified outcome.
Yeah.
Of it.
Ultimately, people do. I mean, notice you.
Yeah.
And it's a mistake to think that, you know, you are completely anonymous. But I think you're right. I mean, you know, since I've left the Met, I go to the opera more than I used to. And I don't know, do you go to the opera occasionally? It's important to do because, you know, if you never go, then, I mean, you sit down there and you have no perspective on what's happening up there. Mm-hmm. And, you know, when you go, you look and you think, oh my goodness, there's people up there. I mean, they're singing and, you know, wearing costumes, you know. And it sets things into perspective, and whatever, you know, Punch and Judy show issues may be bothering you that week, you know, between, you know, down there in the pit. These things they fade into this great panoply of what you're experiencing, and I think it's a great place once you adapt to the reality of the situation.
It suits my personality very well, I think. I mean, I studied with one of the great second flute players of all time, Fenwick Smith, and he really, you know, worked with me when I was a student on how to accompany, and so. It's something I really enjoy doing, even when I'm playing a solo instrument. I love that aspect of coming in and out of the texture, and, you know, now I'm a soloist, now I'm not. And,
yeah. I think that really is the hallmark of playing in the Met, particularly. It teaches you a certain kind of flexibility. I mean, there are plenty of opportunities if you're playing the Magic Flute or Lucia, particularly, and you're a principal flutist, or if you're playing a Rossini overture and you're the piccolo, then you stand up there and you are the center of attention. But I think that the moment the overture is over, the people come onto the stage, you know, and then you have to turn on a dime. And I think for me, it was, you know, you look out into this 4,000 seat hall from your perspective in the pit, and your first notion is, I better have a big sound. I better be able to project. And in fact, the acoustics there are such that it's playing softly enough, which is the real issue. And I know for piccolo players in particular, when you're tracking along with a soprano and you're playing the same line, sometimes in the same octave with them, that, you know, you are supporting that line, but you don't want to detract from the line. And so learning to play at the very edge of audibility was a large part of the experience. And it somehow seemed diametrically opposed to so much of what we are trying to do when we're practicing and when we're studying. We're trying to inflate our presence, and yet in a certain way you have to learn to bring it down into something very refined at times. And I think that's really the hallmark of playing at the Met, is this extreme range that you have to develop.
For me, it's a question less of volume and more of color and
focus.
Or you know, the depth of sound, that it doesn't become, you know, you can still have volume but not be as present.
Right.
So
it's very. I agree with that. Like, and also it's the time frame that we're in is so long.
Yes.
Yes. And, the downbeat. You mean like?
Like, well, no, the operas go on for a long time, and I think that a noise going on for a long time has to have variety, and in that, you know, the for the length of time, it has to have enough color and variety to keep the ear interested.
Yeah.
You know, so it's like a lot of the operas have such amazing moments that lend themselves to these very colorful shades and shading, and you know, it's like, and that has taught me a lot also just about, you know, the other kind of music, the sonatas and the, you know, chamber music.
Listening to singers is incredibly informative, I find.
Yeah, I found myself that when I teach these days, if somebody comes in and plays the second movement of a Mozart concerto, so often I want to grab the iPad and play them Kyrie Te Kanawa singing Dove Sono or something, exactly. You know, because you hear that and it gets into your spirit, and it changes your whole attitude towards what music sounds like, particularly since we play an instrument which is so related to singing in its essence. I think do you find that you've been at the Met now how long?
It's my 5th season.
5 years.
Yeah.
And do you feel that in some way it has, I won't say changed, but molded or expanded or enhanced your playing?
Of course.
How would you characterize that?
Well, the first thing I think which I noticed is I started taking more time when playing solo pieces, because you learn to take time from singers. They take loads of time, sometimes ridiculous amounts of time, you know, and but in a good way. So that's one of the things definitely affected me first, and then of course the lines, everything becomes a little bit. You think more about singing it rather than just playing, you know, the notes. I mean, of course, our whole life we're taught to sing on the flute, and we always we hear recordings and everything. But when you're actually playing together with them, it's a different experience. When you have to match the timing and everything they do, you naturally copy the things they do.
That's right.
And it definitely changes your playing.
Yeah, I mean, for a principal player, the ultimate version of that would be playing the Lucia solo along with the soprano, and really trying to match every aspect of their vibrato speed and the ensemble and the way that they phrase. And again, there is that element of long distance chamber music, you know, like you're playing with somebody who is half a football field away, and yet somehow you're supposed to magically be with them. And I always found that to be exciting and kind of edge of the knife intensity. Who are the sopranos that you've played Lucia with so far who stick in your minds?
Diana.
Diana.
Oh, and Say.
Natalie Dessay.
Oh, yeah. Well, you guys have had some good sopranos. Yeah. And tell us, I mean, people might be interested in knowing, what is the process when you are working out those long duets that you go through with Diana or with Natalie?
Well, they schedule rehearsals with the singer in one of the practice rooms, and I remember doing it with Natalie Dessay. We had to go, and actually they had glass harmonica as well at that time, which I think later they got rid of. But it was fascinating to rehearse with somebody of that level. You know, I was almost shaking, nervous, because oh my God, this is Natalie Dessay standing up close, and she was very friendly and very relaxed, of course. Yeah. I remember working with her as well. I think we were switching that show at the time, and I was in rehearsal with her, and somehow the issue of nerves came up, and she was talking about how she deals with that and how she copes, and how sometimes she said to me, like, I have these moments before I walk on stage. It's like I forget everything. I forget all my music. I forget everything. And it's like walking into a black hole. But somehow it magically happens when I'm out there. It's like the energy comes and she goes for it. And that was fascinating to hear it from her. She has like the ultimate humility, you know, and what a great artist. And with Diana, it was more not like it happened more spontaneously. She was, you know. And we didn't have to rehearse much, actually, for it, and it was very easy to follow.
Maybe you should explain to the listeners how the principal flutist sets up for that solo.
Yeah, it's basically it's a setup in a way that there's a stand next to the conductor's podium. So when the time comes for the flutist to play the mad scene where Lucia comes out after having killed Edgardo. I was going to say Edgardo, and then you wait your turn. Basically, you have to interact with the soprano. You have call and response, as we all know. So, but it's from the standpoint of the conductor, so you're looking at the stage, and that's like it's scary.
I'm curious, what are the most demanding technical aspects of playing at the Met? I mean, like, what are the hardest solos for the piccolo? What do you dread the most?
Oh, Otello.
Oh yeah?
Otello's very difficult.
Uh-huh.
There's one note in Falstaff that is the long A. It's roughly 32 seconds, I think.
Right.
Yeah, that's scary.
Are Rossini overtures, do they tend to be...
Less so, I would
you
say.
You can play them or you can't.
Yeah, I don't
Not
stress
quite
out
that.
about those too much. It's Shostakovich is like Lady Macbeth of Mitsenks, or
So it's really these long, sustained, controlled, exposed...
well, the Shostakovich is not that I'm talking about. That's just blasting.
Oh.
But I think it's with the piccolo, it's particularly hard to know exactly how much air to take in for something like that, because your air turns into carbon dioxide before you can get rid of it, and so it's a fine line. If I really tank up for a note that's 32 seconds long, it's actually not a good idea. I have to take like a middle amount of air and then just really use it efficiently. So it's very tricky, that note, for some reason.
Yeah.
And it's like, Falstaff, there's so much for the piccolo, and then that's the one thing that I'm like, oh my god, the A, it's coming, like so.
Yeah. What's the solo that you would consider to be the most challenging in the York opera?
Well, actually, I enjoy the most playing, I'm sure we all do, parts which have more flute solos, and it's more exciting. But it's surprising what stresses you, because, for example, when you play something like Carmen, I don't feel so stressed, because, you're always in the spotlight and you keep playing. It's like playing a solo piece.
Yes.
And I don't feel particularly nervous or anything, maybe for the entr'acte a little bit, but but it's things like Götterdämmerung, which you play a 6-hour opera, and there's that one solo in the whole opera in the middle of it, and and then you finish on that really soft F sharp, and for some reason that was always the most stressful thing for me. It's so silly because it's such a simple little solo,
If it was the easy stuff.
Yeah. If I had to play that in the middle of Carmen, it would be a piece of cake. But because you sit there mostly not playing for a few hours, and then suddenly you have to do this, and I remember that was one of the most stressful solos for me in the whole 5 years.
Well, for me, I also, playing Valkyrie, at the very beginning you've got the storm scene, and
then 35 minutes of
Siegmund, runs in and he falls on the floor, and the whole flute section falls on the floor, and you just lie there for 35 minutes. And then you've got to pick up your flute, and you've got to play that little transmuted sword theme. And as you're sitting there, you're thinking about this, thinking, when that comes, will I have forgotten how to play the flute? What will happen when I finally put the flute to my lips? And it's what you were saying. It's this pacing thing, this expansive. I always thought of opera flute players in Parsifal as being like three-toed lemurs. Like you just move, you move.
That is an incredibly tricky thing to play.
I find I have this issue with Magic Flute.
Yes.
The first.
Okay,
when the solo.
After
waiting for after the long before the flute comes in the first act, to wait for it.
Yes.
Is that's what I dread the most.
Yeah, it is true. It's the waiting that makes it difficult. And the things that you would play in a solo recital or in a sonata, like falling off a log, they assume this kind of mythic aspect. And,
Yes.
I know it's the intermissions. You have so many intermissions, and if you're playing Carmen and you know, if you were playing the entr'acte to Carmen in a recital, you would just get up and play it. But it's something about that intermission to think about it.
Yeah.
And then you come out, and then the conductor comes. And what I always found peculiar was you know, it's just you and the harp, and the conductor is going like. Did you ever have to confront a conductor about a tempo that
Yes.
solo that you?
In Carmen, with that particular
Yeah.
number, yes, definitely.
In Carmen, yeah.
Actually, we had quite a disagreement a couple seasons ago, and I actually spoke to the harp player and asked her to take a little faster tempo because it was particularly slow.
Yes.
So, so we decided just to do it in our tempo, without following the conductor. So the conductor had to follow.
How to
It
make
happens.
friends with your conductor.
I spoke to the Bohème conductor because he was taking such a slow tempo. This is another long A. They just plague my life, but it was 35 and a half seconds for the passage.
You timed it.
Of course, so I had someone else do it, and you know, and another conductor did it in 24. Let's just, you know, so one I like a lot better. And so, you know, I went in and I was like, Maestro, you know, this is really long. And he said, oh, yes, I know. And he said, but you could breathe. And I said, yes. But then he said, yes, it's not as beautiful, is it? I said, no. And he's like, okay, I will go faster. And then performance comes and he went exactly the same
Right.
tempo.
But that's what
Yeah.
we do. Conductor says play soft, and you just play the same.
Yes, Maestro.
Yeah, Maestro. It's like you make them an offer they can't refuse, basically.
Well, I don't know about you, but in terms of stressful, the beginning of you probably have the same experience. I've played, there's one thing I've played more in my life with both of you guys than anything else, and I think that is the beginning of the second part of the first act of Falstaff.
Yes. Oh my
Da,
God.
da, 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 you know,
Yes.
I started making hash marks in my part of how many times, and the things that it gets so stressful because it's not you that's not happy with it. It's, you know, the maestro doesn't like this
Right.
or that,
Right,
and
right,
it gets very Pavlovian, you know.
Yeah.
So
Totally.
Do you ever think about what you represent in the opera itself, what your solos represent?
yes, I do.
Yeah. I mean, does it inform the way that you actually play them?
Yeah, I mean, I try to make a point of knowing what's going on in the story. It not only makes it a lot more interesting because I do spend a lot of time sitting around,
Yeah.
but it also does inform me, like, you know, it's helpful to know that, you know, at this very large piccolo solo in Turandot, that's the, you know, that's where Liu dies, and so you know, I think of that moment being her kind of her spirit, and
Right.
yeah. So I feel like the piccolo in opera is so representational, and it's fun for me to find what is my role here.
Yeah, I think that is one of the things that is fun. I mean, if you're playing in a symphony, I mean, perhaps you'll play the Pastoral Symphony by Beethoven, which has a little bit of bird
and,
music
yeah.
here and there, or you'll play a Strauss tone poem, which is about as programmatic as it gets. But everything you do in an opera orchestra is a part of this drama. It has some part of the characterization of what's going on, and for me, that became more and more fun. I mean, we talked early on about subsuming our ego into this massive machine, but I think once you begin to understand what's going on, it becomes a much richer experience. And when you play Caro Nome, you know, and you've got the flute solo at the beginning of it, this is in Rigoletto, and you've got these arpeggios which go up at the beginning, and they're kind of dicey. They're a little bit uncomfortable.
Stressful solos.
It's a little stressful because you know you've got a triad of you know, maybe in
It's not
tune,
stressful.
maybe not
Yeah.
so well in tune, woodwinds to play along with, and then you're kind of going in and out of those notes. But also, you know, you're representing her rising hopes for this this
Yeah.
doomed relationship. You know, and there's something in that quality, and in the way that duet for the flutes is all broken up. It's breathless in some way, and it gives us a sense of her own hesitation at the beginning of this. And I find that in some way or another it helps me to understand that when I play those solos.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's. I find it's coming with you know, the more I play, and the more I get to know the pieces, you know, it's gradually, it's like a work in progress, you know, to like understand what's going on. Actually, it's it takes research and you know, to find out and to like live it, to like feel it, and yeah, it's but as you say, it makes the experience so much more richer, and like when you actually are a part of the story.
I think the other part of playing at the Met that is fun in a way that I don't think it could possibly be fun in that same way as playing in the symphony orchestra, is the backstage life is so peculiar. I mean, it's so unusual. There's so much going on back there. You go back into the cafeteria, and I remember we were rehearsing Electra one day, and there was a supernumerary there. I don't know if he's still there. His name is Richard Goldberg. Do you know Richard? He just was in everything. And he's
I barely know him to see him.
I'm sure you would.
Yeah.
He's one of, you know, like a perennial spear carrier. And he was dressed in a slave costume, I guess he was, and he was covered in blood. And I remember waiting in line at the salad bar next to Richard, and I'm talking to him, and I'm saying, you know, I'm sorry, Richard, but you look terrible today. And he said to me, you know, without breaking his stride, he said, yeah, the rehearsal process around here gets worse and worse. You're playing Falstaff, and you're standing in line next to some guy with antlers on his head. And,
well, there's the guy with the nose, I guess Falstaff must be tweaking his nose a lot, and he was behind me, line with me in the salad bar, and the makeup is very good. So you're looking at this guy going, is he contagious? You know, like so.
My favorite was Fasold and Fafnir standing
over
the espresso machine.
9 feet tall.
Getting their espressos ready.
Yeah. It's so funny.
I love that part of it. Or just sitting down in the cafeteria and talking to somebody that you never spoke to before, and asking them what they do, and they turn out to be, you know, the fight master, the guy who choreographs the fights, and it turns out to be the guy's a 9th degree black belt in something, and you know, I always found that part of being at the Met very rich, and
it's the variety. It's the variety that is so amazing, that you know you go in and you never know what's going to happen, and it's always something new, and you know, the new productions and great productions and new singers, and every day it's very stimulating to have the variety. You're not just going in to play another symphony. You know? It's like you're coming into a whole, you know, process, theatrical, you know, musical, and all sorts of, you know.
It's like working at the circus.
Yeah.
There's so much going on. Maron, was it a surprise to you? I mean, you were 20 years old when you joined. I mean, that's kind of young. Was it a lot to digest at such an early age?
Absolutely, yeah. I was very, very lucky. That was really the best day of my life. So I came out, I called my brother, and he took a cab from Philadelphia to New York.
A cab?
Yeah. Custom, yeah. And we were up all night, and the funniest thing about the Met, my brother called my parents, who were in Israel. Now, my parents didn't know much about classical music, nothing at all. And, you know, my brother was like so excited, happy, you know. And he calls him, hey, yes, he won. So my father looks at my brother and he's like, oh, well, so what did he win? Is that a good show? What is it? You know, people in my village thought I won a flute. I won like something.
So this has not made you into a hero in your village?
It did, but you know, people had to understand what it is, what's the Met.
Right, because, you know, in the village where Stefán grew up, they've erected a statue of him in the town. I don't know if you knew that. They pray to it when they're afraid that there's going to be a volcano.
You wanted to ask Maron and Denis to talk about when they met Placido Domingo for the first time.
No, we joined the orchestra almost the same time. Maron auditioned in December of my first season, and so we were both really new in the orchestra. And one night we were sitting in the pit during the intermission, and this guy who looks really important comes from the audience side, and he was talking to us. Nathan Hughes was sitting next to us, and two of us, and he said, "Oh, you guys sound great! So many new faces in the orchestra." And I thought, this must be a conductor, because he's talking about new faces. And I said, "Oh, so you're conducting?" He's like, "Yeah, I'm conducting tomorrow, whatever the opera was." Stifelio, yeah. I'm like, "Oh, great! Well, nice to meet you." And then after he left, we turned to Nathan. I was like, "Oh, who was that?" And he just started laughing hysterically. He was like, "Oh my God, you don't know who that was? In this house, you're probably the only two people I would not recognize."
That was God.
That was Placido Domingo. Oh my God! And it's funny. I have seen him before, of course, obviously, and it's just somehow you would not expect Placido coming to chat to you in an intermission.
No, he is the most personable man.
Yeah.
But there are all kinds of stories like that. Elaine Duvas, the principal oboist, was in an elevator once going up, and Marilyn Horn, the great mezzo-soprano, got in the next floor, and they were riding up together, and then the elevator opened, and somebody else got in and looked at both of them and said, "Aren't you Elaine Duvas?"
I was at actually at your recital, and I went back. I was standing in the back of intermission, and Catherine Rowe was back there with talking with somebody, and I had just been speaking with Nathan Hughes, and so she's like, "Oh, Stephanie, have you met Nathan?" And I was like, "Oh no, hi Nathan. It's funny, there was just another Nathan here." So I started talking to him, and I was like, "So are you a musician?" And Catherine's like, yeah, he sings with us." And I'm like, "Oh really? Like what, she's like, "Yeah, he's in the magic flute." And I was like, "Nathan Gunn, it's just like, you're not in makeup, so it's just, they look so different."
just another cute guy.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, thank you all very much. This was
Thank
fun.
you, Michael.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.